Welcome back to episode 3 of the Untangling Election 2021 podcast, your biweekly podcast keeping track of the 2021 Canadian federal election. This episode is our first platform deep dive, and we're starting by turning orange. The New Democratic Party is Canada's social democratic party, championing a variety of socialist and equality-influenced policies. Traditionally, they have been the third biggest party in the country, and have often held vocal roles in Parliament, holding their peers accountable and pushing progress. This campaign, they've been flying at full force, led by their personable leader Jagmeet Singh. Recently, they released their platform, which contains a myriad of promises and their vision for Canada's future. So, what's it got to say, and what do we think of it? Let's dive into it. As you might know from the format, I don't record these episodes alone. I'm joined by one of my peers, Sav. Say something about yourself, Sav. Who are you?
Hi, my name is Sav. I am a political science student at the University of Waterloo. I'm actually specializing in Canadian politics, and I'm also minoring in gender and social justice. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no worries, Sav. You were one of the first people on my list to call, actually, because I remember back in the day, a few years ago, we were both doing the Political Science Students Association at the University of Waterloo, where I was president, and I think you were my vice president of design, right? Or what was it called?
Yes. Yeah, I was your VP of design, and I 110% absolutely was definitely the first person on your list.
Absolutely. I'm making not judging by the fact we're 3 episodes in or anything. You were 100%.
Exactly.
Because you've always been an enthusiastic supporter of whatever I've been doing, as I've known in the past with you working under me. I think the last time we actually even saw each other was way back in 2019 when we were running an event on the 2019 federal election, a viewing party of the election results. And we had this beautiful cake where you designed like a little photo of like all the leaders photoshopped in funny positions.
Yeah, it was definitely then, and it's very cool to see now that it's kind of come full circle with us, getting back to the newest Canadian election that's right on our doorstep.
Yeah, and it is quite sad that we won't be able to do as many viewing parties and as many like live debate viewings, because one of the best things of any election cycle, in my opinion, is just having people beside you and just watching in terror and amazement and frustration and all those emotions as debates go on or as results come rolling in. Yeah, I'm really going to miss that for COVID stuff.
Definitely 100%. But one of the great things I think that the Political Science Student Association at U Waterloo has done is to keep up those viewing parties. So we actually will be doing one on September 20th, just shameless plug there, with Dr. Boychuk. But we also did one for the American election in 2019, which was not as eventful as previous years. The mail-in ballots really did a doozy on us, and it was a very slow burn to get the election results, but it was still great to have some kind of connections with Prof and with other students as well.
Yeah, I remember I was actually in the Netherlands when that happened, and it was so annoying because I woke up at I think like 2 a.m. to bike out to a friend's place and to watch the results together as they were rolling in. And I was there till like 8 a.m., had work the next day, was completely tired, and there was no result whatsoever. It was so frustrating. I do think that in Canada it might not be that insane. I'm hoping we're a bit more civilized and get everything counted quicker, but that's placing too much trust in the Canadian bureaucracy, I guess.
That is a very fair point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, now that I've gotten my perspective on the Canadian bureaucracy out, should we talk a bit about our own political biases and kind of tell people who we are, where we come from before we head into this topic on the New Democratic Party?
For sure, yeah. So I grew up in Richmond Hill and currently reside in Toronto. I went to high school in Toronto, but my parents were always very liberal-leaning, always tended to vote liberal. I think there was an odd occasion that my mom actually voted Green once because she saw her local Green candidate outside in the rain with a sign saying, "Go out and vote." So she did vote Green once. But yeah, speaking of Green, I've been volunteering as a part of the Annamie Paul's campaign in Toronto Centre, Annamie Paul being the Green Party leader. So that is definitely a bias I have. However, I'm very critical of the Green Party and what's been going on, just as much as I am of any party. But I would definitely say that, generally speaking, I'm very left-leaning.
Yeah. For myself, I consider myself more of a true neutral in the sense that I'm still, I guess, like liberally progressive in my social values, but like neutral in everything else. So I did the little election tracker or the little election thing where you can put in your preferences and then I'll spit out who you should be supporting. And the most support I got for a single party, I think it told me 55% of me should vote liberal, and everybody else is also about 50%, which I guess is a good sign. I think at least a saving grace to my name. I think I only had 30% support for the PPC, so I'm not that terrible yet. But yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet. Wow, that's such a low opinion on my future trajectory here. But anyways, let's get started and talk a bit about this election itself. What do you think of the campaign so far, Sav? Because you're a pretty politically informed person. I always know you as being really enthusiastic whenever an election happens or starts. What do you think of election 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something that I always talk about with my friends, that I love election season. So I am very pumped for this election season. But I think that everyone kind of knew it coming. I think we see that even through my work with the Green Party. We were talking about new platforms since May. So I don't think that if you're involved in a party, I don't think that this is anything new. And I think it's clear, too, that even in terms of the NDP putting out their platform before an election was officially called is a key sign that we all saw it coming. So I don't think this is any surprise. However, it'll be interesting. Snap elections are always interesting, especially as it pertains to the Liberals trying to get a majority, but we'll see where it goes, whether or not it'll pay off for Trudeau.
Yeah, it's very true, but I think Trudeau isn't the only focus we should be having on, because I think the NDP themselves, the New Democratic Party, who are the focus of this episode we're doing today, have been pretty enthusiastic as well. They've had
Yes.
I think last week they got the definite honorable mention in our who had the best first week so far of campaigning.
Yes.
And tell me about it, Sav. Do you agree with that assessment? How do you think the NDP have been doing so far?
Yeah, I think that the NDP and Jagmeet Singh have been doing such an amazing job ever since even COVID happened. I think that now more than ever, everyone is in social media. Everyone is consuming social media. And so we see that with generations that maybe weren't as much. Our parents, or I don't know if I'll go as far to say that our grandparents are on Twitter, but I know that my parents have become more attuned to Facebook and to Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, I think that Jagmeet has just hit the ground running. I think there's so many situations that have happened over the past year where, you know, you can expect Jagmeet to have a tweet that goes viral, or to have a quick one-liner, couple liners about anything and everything, really, and it goes viral. So I give major props to Jagmeet and the NDP.
Yeah, I really feel like he's really connected with, I guess, at least our generation of more interconnected people, to an extent that Thomas Mulcair, I mean, bless his soul, he's an adorable old person, but I don't think he has the same type of social literacy. I was embarrassed when I saw Jagmeet Singh beg Alicia Cortez to play Among Us with her. But if Mulcair did the same thing,
Alexandria.
I would be rioting. Yeah, because I think I remember back in the day when I was playing Among Us with her, he sent out a tweet, and I think he did play with her eventually. But if I saw Tom Mulcair do that, I would end the NDP as a part of Canadian culture right there.
Do you know what I found interesting during that, though? Because I watched it live, and I think that he was just so, like, kind of out of tune with it. I think that one of the great things that AOC has in her prowess is this just innate ability to just talk about issues and to talk so freely about them. Mm-hmm. I felt like quite literally you see it in the comparison when they're talking to each other, when he's talking about Canada. He just seems it seemed quite rigid in a lot of ways, whereas I felt that AOC could speak very freely. So it was definitely an interesting endeavor, but I agree with you. I would not tune in to Mulcair and AOC Among Us night.
Yeah, but I do think even if he does seem a bit rigid, I think he seems the least rigid of any of the other candidates out there. I think he's really definitely been able to capture all the headlines. I think he's really cemented his place in the Canadian political scene to an extent which I'm honestly a bit surprised at, considering 2017 is when he came from, which is I think 5 years ago now. So
yeah. I agree with you there. I think it's very interesting in the fact that, based off of how 2019 election went, how the NDP still continues to really promote him, and he's done an amazing job. I think coming out of the election he was getting some heat, but I think since COVID he's been really at the forefront. So props to him, props to the NDP for that.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine the NDP doing better of any other leader, I guess. I think he's made himself part of the party. So
I don't like if there was a leadership contention after the 2019 election, I don't know who would replace him. I couldn't pinpoint one NDP person say this is our clear defined leader after Jagmeet.
Yeah, so I guess to give a bit of a history lesson, a little bit of context, the NDP have traditionally been a pretty solid political party in Canada, never at the top, but always in contention. So in 2011, they really burst on the scene under Jack Layton, who we all love. Every Canadian loves Jack Layton, except for
I can confirm.
Okay, yeah, I didn't want to speak for some of the conservatives out there, but
I
speak
on the behalf of the entire nation of Canada.
Yeah. So anyways, in 2011, they really surpassed expectations, and they actually ascended to be the official opposition in Canada, so get the second most seats, which a really big victory for the party. However, in 2015, they kind of slipped back to the third place status, and then in 2019, they actually lost a lot of ground, mainly in Quebec to the Bloc Québécois, and they slipped down to only 24 seats, which put them fourth place behind the Bloc Québécois. However, most people did kind of sympathize a little bit with that. I don't think anybody really considers the Bloc Québécois the third party in Canada. I think we all view that still pretty much as the NDP having that role. And if we are to believe the polls and everything out there, we are going to be seeing them make some gains and climb back up and regain that third party status this time around. And I think we did mention Jack Layton really quick. And I did want to throw you a little bit of curveball, because I didn't put this in our outline or really prep you for this at all, Sav. But did you see the headlines where Jagmeet Singh announced that he was going to rename Jack Layton's riding after Jack Layton?
Yes. Yep.
Any opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't think that it's a coincidence that this is happening during an election season. I will say that I think that there have been plenty of memorials that have been made for Jack Layton, and I would definitely support many more coming about. I know that there are petitions right now to have Jack Layton's name renamed for some streets in Toronto, but I don't think that it's appropriate for an electoral district to be renamed after Jack Layton. It seems like he's really trying to solidify that this is an NDP stronghold of some sort, and very casually using Jack Layton's name really to be able to fortify NDP's position in that riding, which I'm not necessarily in favor for.
Yeah, because I think there are a few ridings named after dead politicians or deceased politicians. So it isn't unprecedented. It's just so obscure enough that I didn't know it was a thing that happened. And the fact that he brought it up in a campaign season, it seemed a bit, almost too politically charged. Maybe if it was like a Liberal candidate or a Conservative candidate, because as you said, all Canadians love Jack Layton, who brought up this policy. It maybe I would have stomached it a lot more. I would have been like, yeah, it's a cool thing to do, but maybe, should have been done a little later.
I think too, I think it's kind of representative of what Jagmeet really wants to do with the NDP, right? Jagmeet wants to do what Jack Layton did in 2011. I mean, I think Jagmeet wants to be prime minister, don't get me wrong, but I think that he wants to have that type of orange wave in Canada. And so I don't find it coincidental at all that this is coming about during this particular election season.
Yeah. And I mean, in order to have a good result, an orange wave per se, you also need a good platform. We've looked at the platform, and I think we were all a bit appalled, or not appalled, but a bit, demotivated by its behemoth word count of 115 pages, Sav. Any comments as that, as an also a tired university student in her August days?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I was quite astonished when I saw that, and I thought to myself, there's no way in hell that I'm reading all 115 pages. I think that, I mean, kudos to the people who actually wrote the platform, but that it's a lot. It's a lot.
I mean, at least it has like a bunch of nice bolded terms. It's really easy to find the key points. It's just a lot of pages to get through if you want to digest everything. And I mean, it's spread with a few nice glamour shots of Jagmeet, canoeing or him lobbying or meeting some diverse family. So I mean, it's something to keep everybody entertained. But
I
it
just
is.
worry about, I really do worry about the accessibility aspect of that, though, having a 115 page platform. And again, I agree with you. I think that they've done a good job of the website of trying to break down their key points to the average Canadian. Not that the average Canadian really goes through party platforms, but it's a lot. And I think it's interesting too because Jagmeet has gotten a lot of traction because he's been able to be succinct and to say what he needs to say in a very clear and competent manner. And so his 115 page platform really doesn't help himself in that respect.
Yeah. On the other hand, though, I feel like most people aren't going to read through the platform, and if they are going to get anything from it, it'll just be the news bites that Jagmeet delivers. So there's a lot of stuff in there which I think can be a really nice little like headline or a little like
Yes.
news bite or something you can throw out at random. And I think it's a really good place for him to pull those collective terms from and show that there's some cohesive strategy behind all of it, which we're going to dissect today here, right, Sab?
Yes. Yep.
So, without much further ado, we have gone through this document and pulled out a few highlights, which I think all of us should take note of. If you are NDP, Conservative, PPC, Liberal, Green, or whatever you may be, I think this is a good way to just know who the NDP are, where they stand, and what they offer. So, I think there are 5 main tenets to this platform, which conveniently he put in a little list near the beginning in the opening paragraph. What we're going to do is we're going to go through these 5 and just give some thoughts, some feelings, present a few of the major policies and our perspectives on those policies. So these 5 are 1, healthcare, 2, jobs, 3, affordability, 4, climate crisis, and 5, tackling inequalities, which is a broad category which includes anything from gender, LGBTQ rights, indigenous rights, I believe were also thrown under there. So let's move on to our first point of business. And I'm going to start where Jagmeet starts, or the NDP start. They start with affordability, which is their big slogan, and I think it's really caught the headlines as well. So it's making some waves. What they mean when they say affordability, what I've parsed from this platform, is just Canadians being able to live their lives. I think both of us poor university students, we know that it's quite expensive to live in Canada and it's not getting any cheaper. And what Jagmeet's seeing is really promising this platform is to make it affordable for each Canadian to own a home, to have proper healthcare, to have access to basic services, to, own a cell phone that doesn't bankrupt you. All that is stuff that is included in this platform. Any thoughts on that before I mention some of the few policy specifics he proposes, Sav?
Yeah, I think that I noticed in his platform, I believe he was pledging for 500,000 quality and affordable housing units within 10 years. And I thought that that was quite peculiar to put in. And I think too, I think in the grand scheme of things, 500,000 is really not a lot. And especially over a 10-year plan, it seems quite, it was peculiar and it doesn't seem quite right. So I don't know how I feel about that in terms of affordable housing in their platform. I don't know if you were able to see that.
Yeah, I remember, because the first thing they start on, which I will also want to note, because in my opinion, where legal document starts or platform policy part, the first thing they mention, I think, is the most important thing because it shows what they're really focusing on. And the first thing he mentioned under affordability was every Canadian should be able to afford a house, which I thought was interesting. I want to own a house sometime in my future. It attracts me, a young Canadian resident. However, his promise was to create 500,000 affordable housing units, which you said was a large number. But did you know in the Conservative platform, they actually pledged to create 1 million affordable housing units? in the same amount of time. It doesn't seem like that big of disparity. It seems something maybe more accomplishable, and I do think there are plans to scale that up as it goes along. So it seems like a promise that you kind of have to throw in, and I think he has been kind of leading the way because he has been talking a lot about affordable housing in BC on the campaign trail.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting too. Like, I just question like how they would go about it, right? Because 500,000 affordable units, like you could easily do 500,000 in Toronto GTA area alone, and it still wouldn't really be enough. And so I think it is quite interesting. I do agree with you in the point that it's definitely something that they would have to ramp up over time, most likely, but I think that it's just I agree with the sentiment that I do believe that Canadians should be able to buy in every Canadian should be able to buy and afford a home, but it just it doesn't seem to make sense to me. I don't see how they can really go about doing that. And he doesn't necessarily explain that either. It just seems more of a talking point more than anything.
Yeah, well, I think he is serious behind it because I think what we've seen so far in the election is affordability, I think largely pushed by Singh, has emerged as the topic which has caught the most headlines in this first week so far. And housing is a big part of it. I think that all parties will pledge to create more affordable housing for Canadians. And I think they'll just come from, building more houses. I don't think it's that difficult of a thing to accomplish. It's just going to be expensive. And, I think that's the big issue underlying all these policies are going to cost some money. Also on the note of affordable housing, he's also planning to start some more home start funds, which I think give more money or more advantages to people looking to buy houses. And he's also pledging to put a 20% foreign buyers tax on people investing or in property in Canada, which I think might be a decent move considering the bubbles we've seen in Toronto and Vancouver.
Yeah, I would definitely 100% agree with that. And I think it was a few years ago where Vancouver, I believe it was the province of BC that created more tax or made it more difficult for foreign investors and buyers to purchase within the province itself. I think it's quite interesting. I think this is that point would be a little bit more of a conservative platform point, which I find interesting in an NDP platform. But I 100% agree with you. I like the fact that seems quite appropriate and quite needed.
Yeah, I mean, little side note on you mentioning it seems more like a conservative point. There was a lot of points in this platform, more than so than I expected, where Jagmeet claimed that he's going to protect Canadian businesses, protect Canadian industries. So he made a really big deal about protecting Canadian steel industries, protecting Canadian farmers, etc., building with Canadian goods. So I do think he's really focusing on showing people that the NDP isn't just for redistributing the wealth, but also for keeping the wealth in Canada owned by Canadians, which it's something that really speaks to us young people today, I guess.
100%. And I think that this really comes out of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen now that small businesses were suffering more than ever, and they still are suffering more than ever. And I think this turn in the direction from Jagmeet and the NDP to really hone in on the fact of that we do have Canadian industries, that we do need to have more domestic growth in that respect because of the pandemic, has been very interesting. And it's something that all Canadians, you will never meet a Canadian that says, no, please outsource our industries and take away our jobs. So yeah, definitely a conservative talking point, historically speaking, but it's good to kind of see that more in this platform for sure.
Yeah, I was impressed with that. But and I guess on the topic of affordability, there are three other main points beyond affording housing that he mentions under affordability. He also wants to make medicine available for all, which includes drug coverage for all, and will start with a $10 billion annual investment into making that a reality. He also mentions that he wants to make post-secondary education affordable, which includes reducing tuition, doing immediate debt forgiveness of up to
20,000.
Yeah, 20,000, I believe, which I think should knock out about 20% of student debt, which I like as a recent student.
I will
And
like
then,
that very soon.
yes, and he also, I think the other main point for under affordability was affordable consumer goods, which includes cell phone services and internet coverage. So out of these points, anything that caught your eye?
Yes, I think it's also kind of going back to the point about affordable services. I think Canada ranks high in the world in terms of how much we pay for internet, how much we pay for data costs as it pertains to our cell phone bills and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's another kind of conservative talking point that comes up in the NDP platform, which I find interesting, but I think that it's great that it's in there. In terms of the student, the relieving the student debt, I find that to be really true to the NDP and true to what Jagmeet has been saying throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. I think when we look back to the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, it was really the NDP that very much so advocated for there to be a separate one for students and to acknowledge that students are also hurting during this time. So I think out of all the parties, I really appreciate the NDP really having students on their backs in this platform. So yeah, I was very glad to see that in there.
Yeah, I agree. I did feel included, so to say. Talking about included, I mean, I'm looking for work right now, so he also had a big portion on the economy and jobs. Under this section, he mentioned a variety of different pledges. The main highlight of this section, which was undoubtedly his promise to create more than 1 million good jobs, seems pretty ambitious. And I mean, it is what the economy needs, but as it seems some commentators online point out, you can't just say in your platform you're going to create jobs. It doesn't work like that in politics. But any reactions? Do you think that the NDP can create 1 million jobs? Do you think they should pledge to? Do you think this is a good promise to make to Canadians?
I think it's a great promise to make to Canadians. I think every party will probably follow suit in saying that they're going to create jobs. I don't know one politician that wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting because the NDP has also advocated for a $20 minimum wage and to have more, I think it described in the platform, a temporary 15% hike in taxes for corporations.
I was going to get to that. I'll explain that in a second, but that's an interesting point, which I also want your thoughts on. But yeah, sorry, go on.
But as it pertains to creating 1 million jobs, I say, okay, well, if your plan is to raise the minimum wage, tax the most wealthy corporations, how do you plan on creating jobs through that? It seems like you're actually stifling yourself a little bit there. Not to say that it can't be done, but if you're just very ominously saying you're creating jobs, I need to know how. I need to know what the minutiae are of the plan itself. So I think it's nice, fine and dandy that every politician wants to say that, but tell me how.
I think his response would be to play the Jagmeet advocate here. I think he would argue that it would come mainly from his investments in green technology, in expanding daycare, in expanding different sectors. Those would necessarily create jobs, which he defines as good jobs. So there is some kind of plan, but I do agree the linkages could be a bit more explicit. And I mean, it is a platform. It's far from a policy document. However,
yeah, for sure.
And you did mention, and I did say I did want to get to this. He had a few other interesting promises. So this was less under the economy section, but more under the taxes section, which we'll transition into now. Under the taxes section, he also put that he was going to put into effect a temporary COVID-19 excess profit tax, which means there will be an additional 15% tax on large corporate windfall profits during the pandemic.
Yes.
Thoughts? It's very NDP. It's very on brand.
It is very on brand, and I think that in a time where so many Canadians are hurting right now, like in the financial aspect, it's a great thing to have in your platform to say that, you plan on taxing temporarily, so you can. I do believe that temporarily mark is there to try to appease some of the corporations. Not that I think that temporary would actually become permanent. as most things are. But I do think that it, like you were saying, it's very on brand for NDP, and at a time where Canadians are hurting, it makes sense that taking more money from the rich and distributing it to those who need it the most will really resonate with Canadians.
Yeah, and he does have some more permanent tax measures that he also proposes, and these are also the simple raise taxes on the rich, where I think he is boosting the top marginal tax rate by 2%. He's also putting a new enhanced luxury tax on goods, so RIP if you're trying to buy a private plane. So, and then he's also going to boost the corporate tax rate by 3%, as well as invest more, I believe, in the CRA to collect taxes properly. Which, I mean, is also a good idea, I think.
Yes, yeah, generally speaking.
Yeah. So it's all the standard NDP playbook on taxes. And I wanted to mention one final thing under our taxes and economy section, the guaranteed livable income promises. Because he had a decent section within his platform, in addition to also his other stuff, where they were saying they would work towards making a guaranteed livable income for all. So that's universal basic income, basically. And this would start immediately for all seniors and persons living with disability. And it would be based on the CERB as a model. Any thoughts, Sav?
Yes. Again, I think it's very NDP, and I think it's very of the time. I think that so many people now have really relied on the CERB, and they've collected way more money, and some of them have been able to keep themselves afloat now because of CERB. And taking that away from Canadians will be very hard, incredibly difficult. So I think it's very proper, and I do believe that there should be a guaranteed livable income in Canada. I think that yes.
It's an idea that's of the time, I guess, is what you're saying. However, my biggest concern as somebody who pays taxes is, how much will this cost us? And we'll talk about that later too, because I think we're dedicating an entire subsection at the end towards, can he pay this?
Yes. Yeah.
Moving on, I'm going to talk about right now a bit about climate, which was his next part. And there, I think his big commitment, in addition to all the normal run-of-the-mill climate commitments of, green technology, et cetera, green jobs, he also committed to reducing emissions by 50% from 2005 levels by 2030, which is very close, I've realized. That's within 10 years from now. It's a big promise. And I think you're working for the Green Party now. Is this actually a bit of the Green playbook?
Oh, 110%. I think that the climate crisis has gone to a point where so many people around the world have really started to take it seriously and really understand that there are a lot of larger implications going on. We see that with the amount of forest fires that are going on in places like BC. Across the world, oceans are quite literally on fire. The crisis is here. The crisis has been here. We've known it's been here for quite some time. And I think what the NDP are trying to do here is really try to take a book from the Green Party and kind of present themselves as the party that will actually tackle climate change, which really does cut out the Green Party entirely from that conversation and being that differentiation to some degree with what their basis is. And so, yeah, I think that it's how achievable that is going to be interesting, because as you said, 2030 is around the corner. I don't know if that is actually achievable within less than 10 years. But I do believe that this is in part to the NDP really trying to drive home that this election matters a lot as it pertains to the climate crisis, that this will be the tell-all of where we're really going to go, and if we're going to continue down the path of the point of no return.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's definitely an issue which I see fitting neatly within NDP values, and I think it will continue to fit there as long as it remains an issue.
Yes, 100%.
I think we'll move on to our, penultimate little category. There's also his health promises. And I think we touched upon a little bit of that beforehand. He promised, to expand pharmacare. I think he wants to get rid of privatized care whatsoever in Canada, which is a big promise as well. He wants to end for-profit long-term care as well. And he also wants to provide universal dental care as well as mental health care and school nutrition programs. So anything that catches your eye from this little selection of policy promises?
I mean, I think in that respect, it's very quintessentially NDP.
Yeah. And I feel like we're nearing, I think, the last tenet, the one on equality. What I felt with this platform is that the first 50 pages, and I mean, 50 pages is a lot, were very strong, introduced a lot of promises, and then towards the end, especially during the equality section, he just recanted a lot of statements which we've seen already in the Liberal platform, previous NDP platforms, just re-emphasizing a variety of different rights and freedoms which he will respect and he will ensure will be there for Canadians. Any thoughts, I guess, on the little equality pledges he made? Because I don't think I'm going to go through them in detail, but he basically pledges more towards Indigenous people. He's a really nice segment on that, which, I mean, it's worth a read. And I think he also has a variety of pledges to other minority groups. Anything that stood out to you, Sav, here?
Yeah, I think the ambiguity around a lot of his words in his platform as it pertains to the LGBTQ plus community and other minority groups, I think that I kind of wish that I say that he is the platform, the NDP,
Yes.
kind of went into the nitty gritty of it a little bit more. I think that the NDP is in an interesting position as Jagmeet is now not only the person of color who is a federal party leader, but he's definitely the most prominent person of color who is a federal party leader. And I think that it is almost his... Basically, what I'm trying to say is that, like, there needs to be more substance there. And I understand that he is a representative of that community and he is quite literally the face of that community on a national scale. But there needs to be just more than that. Tell me how you're going to do it. Tell me how you're interacting with these communities. I think he did a great job as it pertained to Indigenous communities, and I love that there's a separate section for that because we absolutely need that in Canada, especially with everything that's come out about the residential schools. It's disgusting, and the government has known this for years. It's just that it came up in fruition now, and especially too with the George Floyd and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement. No, we really don't need a prime minister to go out, take some pictures while he's bending on a knee during a protest. We actually need real change. But I wish that Jagmeet would tell me how you're going to do that. Tell me how equitable and social justice oriented you really are going to be without just saying, I'm going to help the LGBTQ plus community, you know? And it's not just about the LGBTQ plus community. It's about so much more than that. It's great that you support them and it's great that you're backing them, but how? And tell me how.
It's a good point you make. And I think personally, I guess the one thing I would struggle with, and I'm kind of thinking in the perspective of somebody who would write a platform like this, is how do you communicate that how? Because I think ultimately it's being in action and doing that. Because at the very least, like, we know that Jagmeet Singh he obviously does seem genuine when he makes these statements and he wants to do it. I think your concern is more of how well will he uphold those. And I think that's simply a matter of you won't know until he's elected into power. And I mean, he probably won't get more than third place anyways. So I think it's mainly just acknowledging that these are issues, that these are things he will advocate. And then I think it's up to us to judge that advocacy perhaps at a later date.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a very, very fair way to look at it. And I will say too, as much as it might seem like I'm shitting on Jagmeet, I definitely appreciate the fact that there is acknowledgements in there. I think it just seems like a little bit more of a talking point, which platforms are at the end of the day, it's a collective document to be a talking point.
And I mean, I don't know if we mentioned this within our introduction, but you obviously do have more of a connection towards like LGBTQ issues and stuff because you've always been more of an advocate on campus for issues like this. So it's nice to have those different perspectives of people in the field working on what is probably one of the better statements of any party leader on these issues.
Yes, 100%. With the exception of Anime Paul.
Yes, of course. Did she release her platform, by the way?
No, not yet. It's
okay,
coming.
Never mind. It's like I'm still working on the design. No, sorry. We'll get back on topic. And one other point before we move on and start wrapping this up. One thing that was interesting, and I didn't realize this, is that he wants to lower the voting age to 16. That's an explicit promise he makes. And I was sitting here and I'm like, I have a brother who's 16. That kid should not be allowed to vote whatsoever. Any
True.
Any reflections on that point?
I didn't even come across that. That's interesting.
It's hidden in a little section about like election rights or like access to elections, and it stresses we're gonna lower the voting age to 16. And I'm like, okay.
To be honest, I find that to be a little bit of a dated conversation. I think that like it's one of those things that, you know, you might discuss in your civics class when you're in grade 10. But I have not heard a discussion in recent years about lowering the voter age. To be honest, I don't think Canadians want to lower. I don't think Canadians really care. But I am very much so for keeping the voting age 18. I think that I don't even have a good sense of when I was 16. I don't know what the heck I would have thought, and I
just want to get your reflections because that was an interesting. It stood out to me. I noted it down in my notes basically. So
no, that is interesting.
I think we've gone through some of the highlights and some of the low points, some of the high points. You know, it's overall, it's a platform. What can we say?
Yep.
One thing I did want to mention, and I think we both hinted at this a few times already, is that what's this gonna cost? Because that's the big thing. As I was scrolling through this, I'm like, spending money.
Yep.
I mean, it is the NDP. It is to be expected. They do raise some taxes. But do you think that perhaps the inhibitive cost of all these policies might be an issue for the NDP?
Yeah, 100%. I think, like, just as you were saying, when I was going through the platform, I was just thinking, how much debt is this going to put Canada in further? Which, I don't know, I think it's very idealistic to say that we'll never be in debt, but it's quite heavy on the deficit, and it doesn't really seem all that attainable. I think it's a lot of nice talking points in which we all wish we could really have at the end of the day, but the feasibility of that definitely baffles me and confuses me. And I think too, there was someone mentioned in the platform that in the future they can start to think about balancing the budget or something along the lines of that. Which just kind of seems like they're taking a stone and chucking it down the road, you know?
One other funny point I had on this was that I think the only action they did which would save money would be abolishing the Senate. Which but to kind of defend it in some senses, I think it's, as you were saying, it's a bunch of talking points. And realistically, the NDP aren't going to win this election. This is mainly saying, these are the issues we stand for, and these are the issues we're going to advocate. They may seem unfeasible, and they're a very long and very broad range of action points. But if you look at this, you can kind of see who we are as a party and what we will advocate for if you elect us. Because ultimately, you're not electing us to get these things actualized. You're electing us to lobby these goals to other parties to get them put into different policies and snuck into amendments and put into practice that way. Do you think in that kind of looking at it that way, do you think it makes more sense? Are you more accepting then of this?
Oh yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you just said. I think that I think that third parties are incredibly important in Canada, and I think that I can't stress that enough. Even if we look at universal healthcare, that came from the NDPs out in, I believe, it was Saskatchewan. But yeah, it's third parties are very important in Canada, and I think that it's always good that we're having parties such as the NDP that advocate on the behalf of Canadians to really drive home policy and for it to be adopted into the mainstream. Again, whether or not half of this stuff happens, we'll never know because the NDP is not going to win the election, but they are a very important part of political sphere and political environment in Canada.
Yeah, and I guess I agree with that. And I think to wrap this all up in a nice little bow, if you're going to grade this platform on the Canadian F being a fail, A plus being a stellar success, which should inspire a majority government victory. Where would you rank this platform? What would you grade it as a seasoned Canadian platform grader?
I don't know how seasoned I am. I don't know. I think that I would give it a solid B plus or A minus. I think
That's
that
a good mark.
I'm generally happy with the platform. As much as we've spent the past hour really dissecting it and me being maybe a negative Nancy, I think the NDP has gotten across what the NDP wants to get across. That is the main goal of any real platform.
Yeah, I think maybe it is the fact that I am not a diehard NDP supporter, because if I were a diehard NDP supporter, I would give this an A, an A+. This is everything I would want being an NDP supporter. I don't think anything is missing from there. No NDP person should have something to complain about. However, looking at it more from a neutral standpoint, it is a big bill of promises, which is good considering they're going to be a third party, but with a few issues on the costing front. But then again, third party kind of offsets that a little for me. So I guess a B is it's a fairly fair grade. We'll see how it stacks up when we do the other platforms later on. I think the next podcast will be analyzing conservative platforms, so that should be juicy as well. Any final words on the NDP platform and the NDP election experience before we head into our closing segments?
Yeah, just Jagmeet's done a good job. I think that he just needs to continue what he's doing. I do think I agree with you in your later comments about there being a uptick in NDP seats that they would have lost in 2019. And yeah, Jagmeet, you keep doing you, boo.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that concludes our NDP talk today. And before we conclude, I have a personal question. I always ask a personal election-related question in this podcast series. So if you've been listening...
Should I be nervous?
You should definitely be nervous. Because for this hypothetical scenario, you have been invited by every one of the major party leaders to come to their house and have dinner, which they're going to cook for you. Which one do you accept the invitation? And you can only choose one.
Every major party leader.
Yeah, so the NDP, the Green, Liberal, etc., they've all sent you an invitation to come over, and they're going to cook you a meal. Which one do you want to taste their cuisine? Who would be the best cook?
Okay, and so this is purely based off of, like, not sitting down at a table and asking them questions, just, I'm there for the food.
Yes, that's what you're basing on. And I mean, you're a political science student. This should be first nature to you. We talk about this all the time.
I would definitely go with Annie Paul.
Really?
Annie Paul is Caribbean. And she lived in Barcelona for many years. I think that she would make a killer cuisine, whether it's Spanish tapas or something, or any kind of I don't want to say jerk food is inherently Caribbean, because I know that they all have a different... I think that she could make an exquisite Caribbean meal, or Spanish tapas. That's what I'm trying to say. You can excuse the other parts out of the podcast.
Fair enough. She wouldn't have been my first choice, but now that you're making a case for it, I do see something emerging there. Who would you pick? My shout would have been Yves Blanchette, because he seems like the kind of guy who would go into a kitchen and just whip out an amazing home-cooked meal or something like that. Just a hearty meal to get you through the day, you know. Or maybe like something fancy or something. He would go all, like, judging from the debates, I could see him being like, you know, the fancy little chef, you know. I
feel like Blanchette would just be in a kitchen pretending like he's doing something really cool, and then you would end up with like cold like fries that are like not even properly cooked.
Maybe. I could see Trudeau being a decent cook.
I think Trudeau would be like the white dad who cooks steak and then doesn't season it.
I think that would be O'Toole.
You think that would be O'Toole? Oh, maybe actually. You know, I don't know what to make of O'Toole. Like, I look at him and I'm just like, who are you, sir? Like, I can't figure O'Toole out, and it's quite perplexing.
Well, I guess if you do want to figure out O'Toole and figure out party leaders, you should continue listening to this podcast, because I'm not stopping. I'm still doing these bi-weekly episodes. You'll see them in your feed if you subscribe, comment, and like, which you should do, because it is the end of the episode, and I'm seamlessly interweaving my plug here. So yeah, if you do enjoy, do those things. Stay on the lookout for more episodes. And if you want to be featured, reach out to me. I'm always looking for new people. So yeah, any final words? Any goodbyes you want to say, Sav?
Thank you for having me on, and I hope to be chatting with you soon in the future.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll do like a recap episode or something like that. I'll invite you on sometime in the near future as well again. But yeah, thanks for listening, and see you guys later. Bye.